I am a woman in my 70s. I live by taking care of my sick husband. My life has been a tough journey. But these days, I am having the happiest days of my life because of the bachelor downstairs. Please like and subscribe. I met my husband in my early 20s and lived a hard life. We were not financially well off, so I went to where my husband worked and worked together. My husband was a construction worker, and if I went out and worked, I could earn a day's wage, not as much as men. So I went out and worked with my husband because we were financially struggling. I worked even when I was pregnant. I had a miscarriage while lifting heavy bricks while pregnant. It hurt my heart so much, but my stoic husband did not console me. I had to take care of my body and mind alone. I gave birth to 2 children. The first is a daughter, and the second is a son. My daughter is over 40, but I am worried because she is still living alone. I wish she would find a partner soon and set up a decent family. But my daughter has no intention of getting married and says she will just date. It seems that people these days think that they don't have to get married. People of our generation thought that they should get married as soon as they got a job in their 20s. My son is divorced and lives with 2 daughters. I feel sorry for my son who had to live alone because his wife cheated on him. In order to feed 2 children alone, my son goes to work from dawn. I was relieved when my granddaughters grew up a bit. I raised my granddaughters. When my granddaughters were young, my daughter-in-law cheated on him and left the house. I guess my daughter-in-law liked men more than her young daughters. How can she do that wearing a human mask? My husband and I worked hard together and bought a multifamily house and live in one of the houses there. We gave one house to our son, so our son and granddaughters also live in the same building. I still go to my son's house and do laundry and cleaning. I do it for exercise. Excluding the houses where I and my son live, there are 3 more houses in our building. We live on the monthly rent from there, the allowance that my son and daughter sometimes give also helps with living expenses. I want to go out and work, but my husband can't work because he is sick. My husband is always lethargic and lies in bed all day. I wish he would quit smoking, but even when he is sick, my husband seems unable to quit smoking. My husband lies in bed and orders me to buy cigarettes and alcohol. There is a stream in our neighborhood. If you go there in the summer, there are people of my age. There are familiar people and people I see for the first time. The men who come there flirt with the women. Even men in their 70s do that. Men seem to be animals that live with the intention of trying something when they see a woman, even when they get old. To be honest, one of the reasons I go there is because those men flirt with me. I'm an old grandmother, but I'm a woman too. It's been 10 years since my husband became unable to move because he was sick. People these days say that people in their 60s are young. I am healthy. It's natural that I think about men, even though I have a husband who only lies down. When I hear the stories of women my age, there are people who say they don't think about men at all. I think that's not true. Once, I went to the stream and got close to a man I met there. And when he asked me to go to his house, I went with anticipation. He looked like a gentleman and had a nice voice, but he couldn't last more than 3 minutes. My husband was the same. Even when he was young, I never wanted to do it with him. Even when he was young, I just did as he wanted whenever he wanted. He just had time to reflect on himself, and that was it. But the man I met at the stream was the same. I've been to the house of another man I met at the stream, but he was the same. While I was living with a sense of regret, a gift came to me. There are 3 more houses in our building besides the house where my husband and I live, and the house where my son and granddaughters live. A bachelor moved into one of those houses. He is tall and handsome. I don't know how old he is, but I know he is a few years younger than our son. He is slim and always goes to work in a suit. I heard he is a divorced man. For a while, he didn't pay the rent. So I went to his house to talk and found out that he was divorced and living alone. He said he was so busy with work that he forgot to pay the rent, and he immediately transferred the rent to my account, and we had various conversations. He listened to my life story. "Grandma, you've been through so much and you're still having a hard time." He seemed to feel sorry for me taking care of my sick husband. I don't think I've ever had a man who understood my feelings like that in my life. Living with my stoic husband all my life, I think I lived a lonely life. I found him so attractive that I brought him some side dishes. The neighborhood grandmothers must have found him attractive too. I've seen the next-door grandmother and the back-door grandmother bring something to him a few times. It must have been bread or drinks. I've seen the back-door grandmother pressing the doorbell of his house with a shopping bag in her hand. When I went to the supermarket, the neighborhood grandmothers are really cheeky. It seems that old widows harbor ill will when they see a young man living alone. When I brought him side dishes, he thanked me and sometimes refused. He said he hardly eats at home because he lives alone. I told him, "You're like my son. You should take care of your meals. I want to give you something, but there's nothing I can do for you. Do you need anything?" He said he didn't need anything at all. He said that going back and forth between work and home is all he does while living alone. I said, "You're so young, you should have a girlfriend and stuff." Then he said that after spending his earnings on living expenses and sending child support to his ex-wife, he has no money left. He said he couldn't meet a woman because he didn't have money. He pays his rent on time and listens to me well, so I found him very attractive. He's about the same age as my son, so he's like my son. One evening, I went to the supermarket in front of my house and met him coming home from work. "Are you coming home from work? Do you need anything? You're like my son, and I want to do something for you because you live alone." At my words, he said something surprising. "I eat all my meals at work. I told you before. I don't need anything but a woman." I joked with him, "What are you going to do? If you tell me that, you should tell young girls." We both laughed out loud. He honestly said he didn't need a woman either. And what he meant by doing it was, honestly, Wouldn't I think about women at this young age? I can't meet because I don't have money. Would there be a woman who would just spend the night with me without dating? That's what he said. I told him, "You're so handsome. You'll find someone if you look." After hearing my words, he laughed out loud and said there was no such woman. He said that in order to spend the night together, he have to date and take care of a woman. Really? Then there's nothing I can do. I said this and was about to go to the convenience store. The man said, "Why? Aren't you a woman?" He said this and laughed cunningly. "Oh my, would a handsome bachelor like you want to date an old granny like me?" I said this. Suddenly, the man's expression changed and he told me to come to his house. When my husband falls asleep later, I nodded without saying a word and went to the convenience store. After coming back from the convenience store, I couldn't control my pounding heart until my husband fell asleep. This feeling was a first in my life. When my husband fell asleep, I put on makeup for the first time in a long time and went to the man's house. The man thanked me for coming, and for a long time, he and I made love, and I returned home completely spent. I barely opened my eyes when it was lunchtime that day. I couldn't remember the last time I had slept so deeply. I prepared lunch for my husband and ate lunch myself. And when my husband took a nap, I also took a nap. Like a wife waiting for her husband, I waited for the bachelor to get off work. At dinner time, I called the man and he said he was coming home from work. And what the man said was whether he could come to his house again today. I got angry and asked why he was asking such an obvious question. "From now on, don't ask like that and just tell me to come," I said. The man laughed and said he was very happy. For a while, the man and I lived like newlyweds. Being young, he was full of energy. Once it started, it took nearly an hour for it to end. While living like that, the man said something strange. The neighborhood grandmothers kept bringing him things, and he said it was burdensome. And he said he didn't know what those grandmothers wanted from him. But I thought I knew. I told him that the grandmothers who had lost their husbands and were alone were attracted to a young man living alone. The man laughed. I told the man to say, "Grandmothers, line up, you old hags." The man laughed for a long time, holding his belly. The man told me to look into the hearts of those grandmothers. "So if there's a grandmother with a heart, bring her," he said. So I looked at the neighborhood grandmothers. "All old. What about men?" They said this, but they seemed to be subtly hopeful. I took the woman next door to the man's house. The man was very happy and welcomed her. And that day, the three of us spent the night together. The grandmother was very masculine, but later she liked it. I looked at all the grandmothers of my age, and there was not a single person who said they didn't like it. Once, 2 neighborhood grandmothers and I went to the man's house to play. The bachelor says he's very happy these days. He's very grateful to me, but I'm grateful. Could I have thought that such a young and handsome man would hold an old and unattractive granny like me? These days, I feel so good, and my body feels light, as if all the places that were hurting are healed.